joining. As you might have just heard, we are recording this session, just to make you aware. Hopefully you can all hear me okay and you can see the slide on your screen. If there's any problems at any point, then please do feel free to just type in the chat. I think we've got a few more people just trickling in, but I think we'll probably get started as it is 6 o'clock. So as I say, welcome. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us this evening. As you know, this is the CEP Innovate Health webinar series. It's a series of 4 webinars, and the purpose of this is just to give you a bit of a taster of innovation in the context of healthcare, hopefully to give you some inspiration by looking at what innovation can look like, or if you have an innovative idea already, then hopefully it's giving you some pointers for how you might develop that innovative idea a bit more. So just to introduce who's on the call today, we have Dr. Harry Thurkettle's very kindly joined us for this session. So Harry is the Director of Health and Innovation at AirLogic. He's a doctor, he's a mentor on our programme, and he himself is a clinical entrepreneur, and he'll do a proper introduction shortly. We're also joined by Dr. Tamsin Holland-Brown, who, if you joined last week, you would have heard Tamsin talking about how she developed her innovation called Hear, Glue, Ear. I know there were a few questions last week, so there will be the chance for questions at the end of this session. If you have any carried over from last week, then feel free to raise them then. And we have Lucy Dentis, who is Programme Manager for the NHS Clinical Entrepreneur Programme, on the call as well. And I'm Jenny Petty, I also work on the programme. So welcome. And I think we have people joining us from all different backgrounds. In our previous sessions, we had some medical students, we had people working within the NHS at the moment, we had people who are currently entrepreneurs on our programme, and others. So whatever background you're joining us from, you're very, very welcome. If you wouldn't mind just going on mute, everybody, just in case, I think some people it might auto join your audio when you join the call, but that'd be great, thank you. We do hope this will be a sort of interactive session, so as I said before, there will be the chance to ask questions, but you can type in the chat if you want to introduce yourself, if you want to ask any questions, and then obviously there will be that time at the end as well. So just as a very brief recap of our previous sessions, particularly if you're joining us for the first time this evening, so we are the NHS Clinical Entrepreneur Programme, a workforce development programme for NHS staff. And the purpose of the programme is to allow those NHS staff to develop innovations without leaving their role in the health service. We also, as part of this programme, have a patient entrepreneur cohort, and that's individuals who have lived experience of a particular health condition and an innovation that's linked to that condition. And we have a dementia innovators programme for people working in health and social care, so not solely the NHS, but with an innovation focus specifically on dementia. So if you are joining us because you're interested in applying for our next application round, I've just put the dates at the bottom there, and they open from the 3rd of November. And if you do have any questions about that, then obviously feel free to ask later on in this session. So in our previous webinars, just a very brief recap, we've talked about sort of identifying a problem and creating an idea in response to that, so being inspired by that problem. And a good starting point, if you haven't yet thought of an innovative idea, is to look at the sort of current NHS landscape and areas that are looking for lots of improvement. So that could be a source of inspiration, identifying a problem within one of those key areas. And there's just some key documents that are listed on here that we mentioned previously. We also, in a previous session, just looked at some examples of innovations from entrepreneurs who are part of our programme from our previous cohorts, and I've just put their logos on display here. So hopefully it's given you a bit of an insight into how diverse innovation can be, the fact there's many different types of innovation. Some are clinical innovations, some are non-clinical, and it doesn't have to be a medical product, for example. It can be a process or a service. So just some examples on here that we looked at previously. And then in last week's session, we looked a bit more at sort of delving deeper into understanding the problem. Tamsin spoke to us about sort of framing the problem, and just gave some key pointers for things you might think about as you start to develop your innovative idea. So today's session is focused on Lean Canvas and how this approach to planning can help you with developing your innovation. And I'm going to stop sharing and I'll hand over to Dr. Harry Thurkettle, if that's okay, Harry, who's going to deliver this session. So thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jenny. So give me 1 second. So just share my screen. That's great. And can you see that okay?
Yeah, that's lovely.
Yeah. I just there's too many screens going on. I lost you for a second, but I can see you again. Oh, that's great. Yeah, so good evening, everyone. Nice to see so many of you here. As Jenny said, day job is working as Director of Health and Innovation at AirLogic, which is one of the UK's largest specialist health tech consultancies, where I help to lead the operations team and do a whole variety of roles there, including kind of business development, strategy, and helping to run operations. I was a doctor originally, so I trained as a surgeon before getting interested in health tech and jumping ship about 10 years ago now, and have done a variety of things in digital health and startups since. I was one of the year one clinical entrepreneurs. So I've been lingering around the program like a bad smell, I think, ever since the last 9 years. Lucy and Jenny and Tamsin putting up with me. Initially on the program as one of the participants, and then kind of transitioned into more of a mentor role now, and then occasionally get wheeled out to do this sort of workshop. And then also more recently have helped set up something called MedTech Mentor. So I encourage you guys to check that out. Set that up with a couple of friends to try and provide advice basically to early stage entrepreneurs. So medtechmentor.co.uk, if you want to check that out. There's lots of useful articles and blogs and a kind of a free guide on there. So have a look at that. But what we're going to talk about today is Lean Canvas. So we're going to go through what the Lean Canvas is, where it came from, which is Lean Startup. So we'll talk at a high level about Lean Startup principles and that kind of approach. Look at the Lean Canvas and have a bit of an overview. And then it's going to be quite hands-on. So hopefully you've all got a pen and a bit of paper to hand, or the Lean Canvas template to work with. And what we'll do is we'll spend about 20 minutes going through each of the 9 boxes, getting you to fill that out. And hopefully by the end of it, you're going to have a 1-page business plan. So not just a problem and an idea, but thinking holistically about your business, who your customers are, how you're going to reach them, what your costs are going to be, what the revenue structures are going to be, and so on. And then hopefully we'll have lots of time at the end for a bit of a Q&A. So if you get stuck at any point, don't worry, and there'll be plenty of time to ask questions about this, or as Jenny said, about joining the program as well. Happy to take all of those questions. So Lean principles. So hopefully, I think a lot of people have heard of Lean by now, but just in case people haven't and don't know where it's coming from, initially started at Toyota. And they went from being on the brink of bankruptcy and being outcompeted by US competitors to the most successful car company in the world. And the way they did that was by adopting lean operations. And what does lean mean? Well, it's mostly about reducing waste and increasing efficiency. So you can imagine that quite well in the manufacturing sector. But it's now been evolved and applied to many different sectors, including healthcare, actually. There's quite a lot of interesting work on lean operations in healthcare delivery. But in the early 2000s, Eric Ries took those concepts and tried to apply them to running a startup. So what is waste in a startup? What you're trying to remove? Well, waste is spending time, effort, or money building something that people don't want, right? You've got a finite amount of resource. I'm sure any of you who are there trying to build a product alongside a day job recognize how precious time is as a resource in a startup. So lean startup methodology is a systematic approach which you can apply to running a startup, which helps you focus on building the most important things and doing so in kind of an iterative fashion. And then the last book on the right is something which I recommend to a lot of the entrepreneurs who I mentor, and it's called Running Lean by Ash Moira. And Lean Startup is a great book. Definitely recommend everyone to get that and read it. But it's quite high level and quite theoretical, whereas Running Lean is much more of a step-by-step playbook of how to go from a blank sheet of paper to having a working kind of minimum viable product, and all of the steps that you might want to go through. It's a really, really powerful book. And the reason I mention it here is it's actually Ash Moira who created the Lean Canvas. There was an older model which is called the Business Model Canvas, but he adapted it and applied it to Lean Startup methodology. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. Now, this is a slightly busy slide, but it's a really good encapsulation of Lean methodology. So I'll just talk through it, and hopefully it will allow you to see where the Lean Canvas fits in, and then how we'll complete one today, but then how you use it on an ongoing basis. So Jenny was talking about at the start, identifying a problem and thinking about the NHS landscape and the current direction of travel and the priorities of the NHS is a really good place to start. I think often I find working with a lot of healthcare professionals who are turning into entrepreneurs, they often have a really good understanding of the problems that they face, and they have a good appreciation of those frontline clinical problems. But what you don't want to do is to start with a solution and then try and crowbar that into a problem. You want to be problem led, start there, know what you're trying to solve and what you're wanting to achieve, and then go on to designing a solution. So hopefully on those initial webinars, you've already gone through these kind of first two stages: understanding the customer problem, designing a solution. And what we're going to do today is design your business model. So where we often see people fall down is they get stuck in those first two. So they think about problems, they'll think about maybe all of the bells and whistles and this amazing app that they're going to build, which does all sorts of wonderful things. But then they'll forget about the key bits, which is who your customers are, who your users are, how you're going to reach out and get to those customers, what channels are you going to use, what makes your business different from other businesses, what's it going to cost, what metrics are you going to look at, and how are you going to make money from it. And I should say, I think this approach is applicable to startups and for-profit entities, but I also think there's a lot of transferable things in here for not-for-profits and for social enterprises as well. So even if you're not thinking about running a commercial business, I still think this session should be really useful and valuable. But so once you've got your business model, the idea is to look at it and try and identify where are your biggest risks. So in the Lean Startup, he talks a lot about leap of faith assumptions. So what are the key assumptions you're making in your business model that if you get those wrong, then your whole model falls down and you're not going to have a successful business. Now, usually when you're starting out, those assumptions are often in the problem, customer, and solution boxes. Have you truly understood the problem? Have you understood who it's a problem for and who's going to actually pay for that problem to be solved? Have you understood your users and their set of problems? And do you know what the absolute key features, what's the one thing, if your product's going to do, that needs to do well in order to solve that problem? So you look at your model, you work out where your biggest risk is, where your biggest assumption is, and then it's basically taking almost like a semi-scientific approach. So you want to write out a hypothesis. So I think that these customers have this problem and they'll be solved in this way. So there's a falsifiable hypothesis that you can work from, something that you can test and you can prove whether it's true or untrue. And then what you should do is to build the simplest thing that you can do in order to validate that assumption. So when you're getting started out, there may be doing a simple pitch deck, or it may be doing a little bit of a demo. It may be doing some interviews with your customers or your users to make sure you've truly understood the problem. Then get out there and test whatever you've built. So actually work with your customers, get some feedback, understand whether it's solving the problem, have your assumptions that you've made proved correct or not, get that learning, and then go back to your lean canvas again and update it. So now we've ticked off, we've understood that yes, this group of people do have this problem, and we know that this solution is going to solve it for them. Okay, what's our next riskiest assumption? Well, when you're getting a bit more progressed, maybe that's can we market this effectively? Can we go out and find new customers? So then you're going to go through that build, measure, learn loop again to then validate a new hypothesis, right? Which is, if we market our product in this way, then we're going to be able to get uptake from these users. So the idea is that you go through this build, measure, learn loop, systematically de-risking your business model. So you're constantly doing little experiments to make your model better and better and better. Now, each time you go through one of those loops, you come back to it and you look at what you've learned. You can see the three options there. So if you have found that you've completely disproved your hypothesis, you found that this group of people don't have this problem and they don't care about it, well, we need to go back to the model and think about a different problem to solve, right? Or if you think that they do have that problem but your solution is not quite right, then you've got a new hypothesis you want to test. You're going to maybe look at a slightly different solution, so then you'd go around the loop again. And eventually, once you've been around that loop enough times, you should get to the point where you've got a business model which is de-risked, which has been shown that it can work. You've got a problem solution fit. If you're looking now at the bottom of the diagram, that's where you know that you understood the problem, you know that your solution solves it, and then you try and get product to market fit. So that's where you have a list of customers and you're showing that when you tell people about your product, they're wanting to buy it from you, right? You're getting uptake, you're getting that sign, those signs of traction. And that's the point where you then can scale and we get that lovely hockey stick growth curve that we all love in startups. So lots of information on there. I don't want you to worry too much about the detail at this stage, but I just wanted to give you that context so you can see where this is a kind of first step that we're going to take together tonight, but then how that could apply in your ongoing efforts as you're trying to develop your business. So the lean canvas, we're going to go through this in a lot more detail, but this is the one-page business plan that we've been talking about. The numbers which are on the screen are the suggested order that you should complete the canvas in. So start with your problem, then listing up to 3 things that you really want to solve. In the bottom of that box, putting in the existing alternatives is really important. So how are those problems being solved today? Because your space that you can operate in as an entrepreneur and as an innovator is understanding the problem, understanding how it's solved today, and then trying to come up with a better way, right? How are you going to solve that problem in a better way than it's currently being solved? Then move on to your customer segments. There's an important bit here, which is distinguishing between customers and users. So your customers are someone who pay for your product, and users who someone who unsurprisingly use your product. But often when you're in healthcare innovation, they're 2 separate groups of people, right? So if I've got an app and I want to sell it to a hospital, then my customer is going to ultimately be probably the chief financial officer and the management of that hospital, right? But my app may be designed to benefit clinicians or may be designed to benefit patients. So they're being my users. Now, one of the challenges that we face as healthcare innovators is making sure that we solve problems for both groups, right? If you solve for just the customers or just the users, then your business model is not going to work. So you need to think about both groups and their needs. The other thing that you can put into customers is early adopters. So you can think of the subset of those big segments you've got in the top. Who are going to be your first 5 customers? The first, to use my example, first 5 hospitals that you're going to go and speak to, and what distinguishes them? Why have they got a reason to get excited and want to try your product? And then some new boxes, I'll probably whiz through these because we'll come back and talk through them in more detail, but your unique value proposition, your promise of a better way. The best way to think about this is if you've got a landing page on a website, you typically got about 8 seconds to grab someone's attention. So in 8 seconds, which is probably 1 or 2 sentences, why should someone care about you and stop on your website and keep on reading it? think about that. Or if you're in the infamous elevator pitch, what's going to get people, your target customers, really excited and like, yes, that's something which we need. So a really clear, simple message which says why people should care about you. How are you going to solve their problems, and how are you going to do that in a better way than they're currently solving them? Your solution, box number 4. You see this is intentionally the smallest box on the lean canvas. Is where lots of entrepreneurs and innovators get stuck because they get really excited and they think, oh, well, my app can do this or that or the other or this thing and all of these wonderful features and functions. Whereas actually trying to laser focus in on what are the top 3 things, maximum of 3, that your solution needs to do in order to solve those problems. Channels is how are you going to communicate about your idea, what marketing are you going to do, how are you going to connect with your customers and get them excited. Revenues and costs, hopefully that's what it says on the tin, can be challenging when you're at an early stage to think through these, but thinking about different types of revenue models. Are you going to have a subscription? Are you going to have a one-time purchase? Are you going to get funding from an industry partner? Or if you're not for profit, how are you going to get grant funding? Where are you going to get the money in to sustain what you're trying to do? And then your costs, again, can be really tricky when you're first starting out to think about, well, what are all of those operating costs if I've got 100 people that I'm employing and all the rest? I think a good thing to do on both of these is to think about the near-term future. So if you're going to be trying to build a minimum viable product, the first thing that you're going to sort of ship, what are going to be the costs involved with building that? And you can narrow the focus down. So if you're going to go back to that build, measure, learn loop, you've got some experiments that you want to run. What are the costs associated with those initial experiments? Metrics. So don't fall into the trap of lots of vanity metrics. Try and measure what actually matters. I think one good tip here, and when you're starting out, remember we're trying to find that problem to solution fit. Have you understood the problem? Have you got a solution which solves that problem? What is the metric which shows that your solution actually solves that problem? What numbers are you going to turn a dial that your customers are actually going to care about? And vanity metrics is getting excited about big looking numbers that don't actually mean anything. So maybe an example is, I've got a website, I get 100,000 unique visitors to my website every day. Isn't that amazing? But then only one person a day is actually buying my product. Well, that's probably a much more important metric for you to focus on, right? So it's about focusing in on what's the most important things to your business at the stage that you're at now. And then unfair advantage, last but definitely not least, what stops an Amazon or a Google or whoever else coming in and sideswiping your business, and what's difficult to replicate about what you're doing. So that could be your advisory board, that could be IP protections, that could be unique skills that you have in your team, it could be other things, but important to flesh that out, and often can be one of the most difficult boxes when you're starting out, but good to put some initial thoughts in there. So that's the Lean Canvas overview. Some tips. So Lean Canvas should be a quick exercise. It should take less than 30 minutes. In fact, we're going to do it in 18 minutes in a second. So we'll see how that goes. If Tony Young was on the call, he always says that his head hurts by the end of those 18 minutes. Can feel a bit intense, but we'll see how it goes. But the aim of what you're doing, remember, is to find the right questions to ask. And so when you're starting out in particular, you might not have all the answers, and that's okay. But you at least find the gaps and the questions that you have to answer. So if you're trying to validate whether this could be a successful business or not, and you don't know who your customers are, how much they'd be willing to pay for your solution, and how big the problem is, how many people are feeling it, then that's where you need to spend your time, right? You need to go out and get some research done, go and speak to some people and fill in those blanks. So it's almost like giving you a map to find the key areas of your business model that you need to spend more time and attention on. And yeah, if you get stuck for that reason, move on. So if you're really not sure what to put in the costs box or something else, then move on, that's okay. But that may show you where you need to focus your time and attention. Customers and users, I've already talked about, but I'll say it again, just to make sure that the point really lands. Customers is someone who pays for your product. And that's something which I commonly see people getting a bit confused about. And there could be lots of different customer segments depending on which revenue model you go down. So if I've got an app, I could sell it to a hospital, I could sell it to a GP practice, I could sell it directly to a clinician, I could sell it directly to a patient, or I could get an industry partner to fund it, and then it's free to the NHS. So in that sense, there's 5 different customer groups that I might want to target. One thing that I really encourage people to do is to get out of the house and talk to people. So once you've got your lean canvas, one of the good things about it is it's a way of holistically describing your idea, and it gives you a structure by which you can go and get some real feedback on it. Right. So not just focusing in, I've got this idea, I've got this app that I want to do, but you can actually sit down with a mentor or with a colleague or with a friend and actually go through it and get feedback and understand. Often when you're very close to something, it can be hard to have perspective. So getting out there and actually talking through your model with somebody else can be really, really valuable. And then the final bit on there is to do multiple iterations. So what we'll try and do today is we'll try and do your kind of big idea, your big vision lean canvas, and we'll put on all of the different customer segments that you could think about, and we'll try and keep it quite high level. But what I encourage people to do is to do multiple versions of it, to kind of use it as a lens to examine your business model from different perspectives. So one example of how you might do that, going back to what I was saying before, if you've got one model which is looking at hospitals as your customers, then they've got a very distinct group of pain points and problems that you're going to try and solve. But what we might want to do is another version of the lean canvas, which is dialing in to your end users and their problems. So you spend some time thinking about what are the specific problems that your users have instead of your customers. So then you can examine your business from different perspectives. And often getting that ideas out of your head and onto paper and getting them out in front of you, you can actually look at them and you can say, which one of these do I feel has got the most likelihood of being successful? And you can pick that up, and that's the one that you're going to go out there and test and explore. So encourage people to do kind of multiple iterations on the same lean canvas to sort of explore their business from different perspectives. So that's the rapid intro, but there's no way to learn like doing. So what we're going to do now, hopefully everyone's got a pen and paper to hand, or the lean canvas template, either's fine. I personally prefer writing these out. I think it kind of flows better, but up to you. And what we're going to do is we're going to take 2 minutes per section, and we're going to go through one by one and fill it out. So if everyone's got their pen and paper ready, we'll start off with the problem box. Set the timer going. There we go. So 2 minutes. Start listing out the top 3 problems that you want to solve with your innovation. And if you haven't really got a formed idea yet, just pick a problem. Right? Pick something that you care about and think that needs to be solved. I don't have too many people with their cameras on. I always try and gauge how frantically people are still writing before talking too much. Looks like people are still scribbling. I'll say we've got about a minute left. If people can, at the bottom of the box, think about existing alternatives. So look at your problems. How are those problems solved today? Is it with a competitor solution? Is it with some manual workarounds? Is it spreadsheets and emails and picking up the phone and calling someone? Like, how are they solving? How is that problem solved today? Okay, so finish up that thought, and we're going to move straight on to the next box. Right. Let's move on to customer segments. So start with your customers. Who could pay for your product, for your solution? Who feels those problems that you've listed and would pay for it? Think about different customer groups or segments. So I've given you a few already. Could be hospitals, could be ICBs, could be GP practices, could be clinicians themselves, could be patients. Which segments, and then try and add a little bit more detail in there. So don't just write doctors. And for example, you can add a little bit more detail in what type of doctor. Once you've got a few customers down, if you've got users who are different from your customers, list out a few key user groups who are going to be the end users who actually pick up your product and use it. Then last 20 seconds or so, if you've got time, start thinking about your early adopters. So your early adopters are going to be your first initial people who might be customers. What makes them early adopters? Why do they have a reason to switch from their current way of doing things to your new way? Hey, time flies. I can see people frantically scribbling. You might have to come back to it because we're moving straight on to unique value proposition. So in one sentence or two maximum, what is your promise to your customers of a better way? How are you going to solve their problems in a better way than the existing alternatives? And write down something that would grab your customers' attention. People scribbling away. I'll give one more piece of advice on this. You may want to think about the benefits that people will see because of using your product. You don't want to get super technical, but how will their life be different if they use your product or service compared to what they've currently got? What are the end outputs? If you think about big multinationals who have billions of dollars in marketing budget, what do they say? Coca-Cola doesn't say we are a carbonated fizzy drink that will help you feel refreshed. They say drink happiness or something similar. I mean, slightly silly, but hopefully the point lands. You really want to think about how you're going to change that customer's life by using your product. Oh, so now the fun box, which is solution. So I think your big challenge here is keeping this down, in my experience, because everyone gets really excited by this. But your top three things. So looking back at your problems, what is your must-have feature or features, up to 3, that your solution needs to do in order to solve problems for your customers? If you want, you can add in, 1 or 2 things for how it's going to solve problems for your users if they're different. Got 1 minute left on this. If you're struggling, look at your existing alternatives and think what's wrong with them, right? And how are you going to be better than those existing alternatives? Because really, you've got to be between 5 and 10 times better than the existing alternatives in order to break through. And that's usually a good rule of thumb. Are you going to be faster, quick, cheaper, higher quality with better outcomes? How are you going to be different and better? And what solution or what features does your solution need in order to deliver that? What's the key thing that it has to do effectively? Sorry, the joys of working from home. I don't know if you can hear some heated discourse between my wife and daughter. Hopefully that's not too loud. Let's move swiftly on to channels. It's a path to customers. So this is your marketing. How are you going to go? You built this amazing solution. How are you going to go and find customers who are going to use it? Where do they hang out? Are you going to do email marketing, outbound stuff, direct sales calls? Are you going to go to trade shows? Are you going to get referrals from people in your network, people that you know who might be able to connect you? Write down some high-level ideas. And then once you've got a few things scribbled down, look at your early adopters. Think about your early adopters. How are you going to get in touch with them? Right? Hardest thing in business, going from 0 to 1, right? Your first paying customer. Where are they going to come from? Because that's probably a different approach than your kind of more mass marketing. How are you going to identify and contact and get in front of your first customers? Shut that thought. And then we're going to go into revenue streams. So how are you going to make money? So again, can be if you're a commercial entity, how are you going to sell things? What pricing model are you going to be using? Are you going to use a subscription? Are you going to do a one-time purchase? What's that going to be? If you're not for profit, you're still going to need some money to fund your activities. Where's that going to come from? You know, even if this is charitable funding or grant funding or whatever, that's fine. But how are you going to get money in the door? Got 1 minute left. You've got a couple of models scribbled down. You might want to think about actual price points, and that could be really tough when you're first starting out. But try to answer this question: how much would somebody pay to have the problem that you're solving solved for them? How much do you think the existing alternatives are costing? Because that's a good assumption which you can then go and test. So try and ballpark it. Is it £10,000 a year, £100,000 a year, £1 million a year, £10 million a year? Do it in a factor of 10. What do you think the likely annual price that you could charge per customer would be for your product? Don't worry if it's wrong, but put down your best guesstimate. Okay, and then straight into costs. So what are the high level costs that you're going to incur? You can write down buckets of costs. So you could have staff, you could have marketing, you could have product development. Put down some high level buckets to start with. What do you think you're going to need money to pay for in order to run your business and get to the point where you've got a minimum viable product? Again, 1 minute left. If you're struggling with this, narrow the scope, the time scope, down to the next 6 months. So if you're going to try and run your first experiment, you're going to try and get to having that first prototype. What's that going to cost? And again, ballpark estimate what you think that will be. Okay, last few seconds on this one, and we're almost there. Two more boxes to go. Let's restart that, and we're now going to look at metrics. So what are the things that you're going to measure, which tells you whether your business model is working or not? Again, as a pointer, when you're starting out, think about your problem and your solution. How do you know your solution is actually working? What are the key numbers that you could look at to prove that you've got problem to solution fit, that you've understood the problem, you've built a solution that actually works? What are those numbers? One more minute. Encourage you also to think about acquiring customers. So how are you going to convert customers, and how are you going to measure whether you're good at doing that? So going from a lead through to a paying customer and getting adoption and uptake, what sort of numbers might you look at? Five seconds left, and then we're into the last box, the home stretch. So, unfair advantage. What stops somebody from copying and stealing your idea? What's defensible about what you've got? So this could include things like IP, trademark or patents. Often that can be challenging, particularly in software. So then think more widely. What skills do you have which other people don't? Are you going to get an advisory board with the best known professor in a particular field who's going to be there Do you have a network of contacts that you can use? What's your unfair advantage? Right. My cockapoo is now joining the conversation as well. It's all going on in the Third Kettle household tonight. Apologies if there's background noise. Okay, we're nearly there now. 30 seconds left. It may, just so you make sure you're widening this enough, it may be stuff that you don't have yet, but stuff that you want to get. So if you're struggling to put anything in here, what are the, if you could wave the magic wand, what would you put in there as being defensible? Okay, last few seconds. Brilliant. Okay, and everyone take a breath because I know that can feel fairly intense. But hopefully, if you've been following that along, you've gone from an idea, and imagine a lot of you are quite an early stage idea, into your first business model, right? Your first holistic view of what you're trying to achieve. Hopefully, it's already stimulated some thoughts as to where your biggest gaps are, where you need to go and do some further validation. Yeah, hopefully useful exercise. So let's come back to where this all fits. So we've hopefully at least partially understood a customer problem. We've got a solution in mind, and now we've got a business model. So what do you do with that next? So I'd actually add probably personally a step in here, which is to do those multiple versions of your lean canvas, right? So imagine this one's quite high level and probably encompasses quite a lot of different kind of customer groups or problems. You might want to replicate it, but now dial into your users and what are their problems as opposed to your customers, or vice versa, right? A lot of people might see a clinical problem, which is the pain is felt by the users, but when you speak to the hospital's CFO, their problem might be very different, right? They might be bothered about how you're going to show return on investment. They might be worried about tight budgets, might be worried about something else. So think about doing a couple of different versions, focusing in on different customer segments, focusing in different problems, focusing in on different revenue models. Then pick the one that you feel like has got the greatest chance to succeed intuitively, and then think about how you're going to test it, right? Look at it and try and identify where are your biggest gaps in knowledge and where you're making big assumptions. And again, usually that's going to be in the problem, customer, solution, and UVP boxes, the first 4 boxes that we covered in. And so how are you then going to go out and test something? Well, usually best way, go out and speak to people. And see a lot of people who are saying, oh, I'm going to do a survey. Doing a survey presupposes you know the right questions to ask, which often can be a challenge. Recommend trying to get some like semi-structured interviews booked in, have a little bit of a script. So maybe the thing that you build is a little interview script that you're going to go and run with 10 people, get out the door, go and speak to some people and see whether you've actually understood their problems. Don't pitch at them, listen to them, and go in with a learning frame. So you go out there, work with your customers, get that feedback, then you analyze it, and then you go back to your model and you update it. So I thought the problem was X. Actually, after speaking to these 10 people, what they really think is the problem is Y. Okay, well, let's now update that. And then how does that ripple across the lean canvas? Well, maybe we need to focus on a slightly different solution. Oh, look at that. Someone's drawing on my screen. That's exciting. I've not seen that happen before. But yeah, so maybe if you change the problem that you're going to be solving on the basis of the feedback, that's going to change the solution which you're going to be going at, and then you go around that loop again, right? So okay, we've ticked that off. What's the next thing that we're going to go out there and test? And one of the most common things I hear when mentoring and coaching early stage entrepreneurs is that feeling of overwhelm. right? That feeling of there's a million different things I could do, and I don't know whether I should be focusing on this, that, or the other. This is a way to hone in, right? If you can every 2 weeks, every 2 week sprint cycle, as they say in Agile, you want to pick a focus area and a problem that you want to, an experiment that you want to run in those 2 weeks. You can cut out a lot of the noise, right? And really focus your time and effort and attention on what's going to be the most important thing that's going to help move your project forwards. And the challenge which you'll have is to go through that build, measure, learn loop before you run out of time or someone else solves the problem, right? So it's a speed game. How quickly can you iterate through those build, measure, learn loops, find your problem to solution fit? So you've understood the problem, you built a solution which actually works and people care about, and then how do you get that customer factory, he calls it in Running Lean, but how do you get a reliable method of getting in contact with potential customers, turning them into paying customers, and then deploying the solution effectively so it's actually working for them? And then once you've got those two things nailed, that's when you're really ready to scale. So that's often when, people will take pre-seed or seed funding and try and get problem to solution fit with it. And then get maybe your Series A will get you up to product market fit. And then your Series B and Series C, if you're familiar with these terms, your bigger chunks of funding, when you're going to raise 30, 40, 50 million or more, that comes when you've got that product market fit and you've got customers that you can access, but you need the resource in order to be able to service all those customers. That's the time that you would then accelerate your funding. So it gives you something to focus on now. And it also gives you a bit of a roadmap around which you can structure things like your evidence generation strategy and your funding strategy as well. So look, hopefully that's been useful. I appreciate it's a pretty intense session. It can make people's brains hurt. So apologies. Apologies if anyone's now got a headache. I hope that was useful. I want to just share a couple of resources which I recommend often when I'm doing that kind of mentoring or coaching. So Lean Startup, I think every entrepreneur should read the Lean Startup. There's no silver bullet, there's no perfect model, there's no magic formula which automatically means that your startup is going to be successful, but the Lean Startup is a really good point that you can start at. Running Lean, if you like the Lean canvas and you want to really dive deeply into that, then that's where it came from. And there's loads more detail there about how to take that model, start testing it, how to start thinking about putting together an MVP, and how to put it into practice. If you're a bit further along, Hooked, how to build habit forming products, is really good for product design. So it walks you through how you build sticky and engaging products that people continue to use. And then if you get to the point where you've got a little team and you're wanting to get more effective and efficient in team working, the Scrum book is a must read. I highly recommend it. And then shameless plug for MedTech Mentor as well. We put together a little starter pack which goes through a lot of the stuff which I talked about today. I'm doing Lean Canvas and starting out as a MedTech entrepreneur. So go check that out if that's of interest to you. And I think just one quote: can sound intimidating and can sound like a lot of failure when you're going around your build, measure, learn loops, but that's okay, right? The trick is to not give up, but to be self-aware. And so this is one of my favorite quotes: I've not failed, I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work, right? And it can sometimes feel like that when you're trying to innovate in the healthcare space. But if you're passionate and you've got a real problem that people genuinely feel, keep at it. You can find a solution which solves that problem in a better way than the existing alternatives, then you're onto something. So I think that's it from me. I shall stop sharing. And does anyone have any questions? We could talk about any and all of the Lean Startup, Lean Canvas, and of course the Clinic Entrepreneur Program as well. We've got Tamsin and Jenny and Lucy all here as well, so I won't get it wrong and give you false information. Anyone got any questions, any thoughts? David? Let's give it.
Hello, thank you for that
Hello.
workshop. That was really, really helpful. So I appreciate that a lot.
Oh, I
And
should do my Tony Young. So you have to introduce yourself and say what you do.
sure. So I'm a software engineer and founder building a product for adults with ADHD. And we currently have, or I currently have about 20% retention after the first week, but it flattens out. It stays at 20% for like 8 weeks. And I've done zero marketing. My question is is it worthwhile to focus now on marketing, or is 20% not good enough? And maybe thinking instead of a fish, like a fishing rod, like how would you approach that question in your head?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we could sit and talk about that for an hour, I think, David. I mean, there's a lot of specifics within that. It will come down a lot to your unit economics, I think. I really should get shares in running lean, I think, because I recommend it so much. But if you're looking running lean, it will talk to you about your customer factory. And it depends a little bit on your price point as well, and your how you're structuring your revenues. If you're putting people onto subscription and they're all leaving, and you're investing a lot of money in customer capture, and your costs are outstripping your revenues, then you need to fix that part of your model, because if you keep pouring water into a leaky bucket, it's not gonna it's never gonna fill up, right? But
So it
if
currently
you
has low, there's a low profitability. It's about 50% gross margin.
Mhm.
So that's what I'm after right now. And there's no acquisition cost because I'm not investing anything into marketing right now.
But that's a consideration, right? So
Mm.
if you're going to spend 100K on going out to getting new customers, how many customers do you think you can get for that 100K? That's one question. And then if typically from a lead that you've never spoken to a paying customer in general, depending on how good you are, there's somewhere between a 1 and 5% conversion rate. And then you've got 80% of those customers dropping off. So suddenly your numbers are looking quite small, right? For every 100 leads that you're going to be bringing in, you'll have whatever, maths is bad, 0.2 of a customer at the end of it. Let's do 1,000. You're going to bring in 1,000 leads, and you're going to have 2 customers. Now, can you make your business work? So I do some back of a beer mat calculations on that and try and stack up your unit economics. I would think that you're most likely going to be best served by increasing your retention and referral rates, because that is a fairly significant drop off. Particularly, are you on a subscription model, or is it a one-off?
Yes, it's £30 per month, and about 4 months on average people stay.
Okay, yeah. So I would be looking there, right? Because we just said it's really expensive to go and do marketing and to rake through all the noise and to acquire new customers, and you've got 80% of your potential revenues are disappearing. So I would be personally, I think that's, my gut is telling me that's where is likely going to be the best place to focus, because you've done the hard work, right? You've converted somebody who's come and they've turned into a paying customer. That's really hard. You've done that, and then you've lost them. So how can you stop losing them? And again, not me wanting to cast any stereotypes. Maybe some developers might not like doing this, but go and speak to them, right? Go and sit on
Thank
their
you. That's
shoulder,
really,
and speak to you. Why are they dropping off, right? Why they obviously thought there was something valuable there, and then they haven't. Something they're not fulfilled. So why are they dropping off? What is that? And it could be something really simple, right? It could be a really simple change that you could make. And so it's probably that's probably where I would think you would focus, but do the high level kind of unit economics and financial picture, so you make that decision in an informed way. I think, if that helps.
that's really helpful. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. So I think Audrey got there next. Do you want to? Have you got your camera, Audrey? It'd be nice to see you. You don't have to, of course.
Oh, sorry. I just got back from work, so
No, that's okay. We'll make do then. But yeah, introduce yourself, Audrey.
Hi. Good evening, everyone. My name is Audrey Zerero, and I'm a co-founder of an app, a GLP app called Dosery. So I'm a GLP user, and when I started using GLP medications last year, there was only one or two apps on the market that were allowing you to track your medication, the manufacturer, and the dosage that you're on, and it allowed you to upload your pictures. So I saw a gap in the market, and I was in multiple groups from Facebook, WhatsApp, Reddit. I'd done a lot of research, but we experienced challenges with our developer. So by the time we launched, the market was already saturated. So now we're at the point of, okay, we need to reconsider what our value, who our customers are, and what it is that we're providing. So like we're basically back to the drawing board. So how do I then find did you say co-funders that will then fund like the next stage of the project, or the next stage of how I then want to evolve the app?
Interesting question. I mean, I think we've actually got a more fundamental problem from what you've said than finding funding, right? And this isn't meant to be too critical, Audrey, because it's really common. There's a lot of early stage entrepreneurs who would say similar things. I often get people who come and tell me, I need 150K. I say, well, why do you need 150K? Well, I want to build an app. So, well, why do you want to build an app? And you go down that thing, and they haven't really validated the problem. And they have in their heads, if I build this perfect solution, then people will come to it. But that's the wrong way around. So I think it sounds like you've done some research. Oh, sorry. Someone chiming in. I would go back to the research which you did and look at that again. And what we were talking about before, there's multiple versions of your lean canvas, right? Maybe just start with a few different lean canvases open and start thinking about problems that your intended customer segment might suffer from. Like you found one niche, and again, it goes back to what I was saying before, right? Those build, measure, learn loops. You've got to cycle through that quickly enough so you get to those milestones before someone else does. Someone will come and eat your lunch otherwise, which sounds like what's happened. But so I think starting there, and then I think raising funding is a tough environment, particularly for early stage companies at the moment. Grants are super competitive. And capital is also pretty hard to come by. So really what you want to show is a really clear, a compelling idea and business model. And you ideally want to show some early traction. So I think I would be looking at what I've got already. You said you've already released a solution, but it's maybe tough to cut through. Think about what are the core capabilities of that solution that you've built, and then think about maybe linking those to some of those other problems. Is there some way that you can pivot or shift what you've currently got and solve a new, slightly different problem? Or the other way is to go toe to toe, and you look at some of these other solutions which have come on, and you analyze them to see what aren't they doing well. What can we do better?
So we've looked at those options, and we've analyzed what other apps are doing, but then it's easy for them to then just copy us and implement it into their own app. So it's a really tough field, to be honest. So I think the best option is for us to pivot. I've identified like 2 customers, and the problems, I just struggled to find 3 problems, but I know how we can then pivot. It's just getting the funding.
Okay, so I mean, I feel like we could have a longer discussion. No, I think nailing down those problems, understanding your customer properly is going to be really important. It sounds quite speculative from what you've described to go out to try and raise further funding at this point, and I think that might be a struggle, being super direct about it. So you need to be able to tell a convincing narrative to whoever's going to give you money, whether that's a grant funding body, whether that's your friends and family. If you're doing a friends and family round, you need to have something which stacks up on paper, right? And you need to be able to make your lean canvas or whatever business model you choose to use work on paper. And So that means that you have to have identified a problem. You have to have identified a market where you think that has got enough traction. But God knows there's enough interesting stuff in and around the space of kind of weight loss and the things. There's a rich space to ideate in there, and there's definitely
and it's still growing and evolving and still within its early stages. So there's a lot of opportunities for growth. So yeah. But thank you so much, Harry.
No, my pleasure. I say go back to that problem customer boxes on the Lean Canvas and
yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. Good questions, Meg. Goodness me, putting me on the spot, keeping me honest. Who's next? Is it Fabiola? Did I say that right?
Hi, Harry. Yes, Fabiola. I'm from the Department of Health and Social Care. But what I'm sort of pursuing is nothing to do with my day job. So I had multiple questions, so it was incredibly helpful. But I think the point at where I was sort of struggling the most was when you were asking us to think about revenue streams and what.
Sorry.
Sorry. So the point, some things were easier than others. So like, you know, the benefits, the solution, and the various channels. And because I have done a lot of research, I've actually also patented the solution, and so and it's currently sort of self-funding proof of concept. But I think what I was trying to think about is the revenue streams, and you were really helpful in saying maybe look at what the possible even if it's not strictly competitors, but what the other current existing solutions are doing. But any other thoughts on that? Because I think for me, having been in the healthcare, having been in healthcare and in the center of government for over 10 years, I sort of have always been fascinated by what is out there, and some of the solutions that maybe are incredibly successful due to the marketing, but the actual solution is not that groundbreaking. And so for me, I think I know what I wouldn't want to be. I wouldn't want to be elitist and, a certain market of it. So I would like it to be a public health accessible solution, and then ideally reinvest any sort of funding in then developing countries. So I think I was fascinated by Townsend's solutions. But so how do you pick that price point? How do you think about this? Where do I start with that thinking? Sorry, I know it's an enormous question.
No, great question. And again, we could have a long conversation about this. Let's go one point maybe before I get into it, which I like what you said there. And there's something that we see quite a bit in the entrepreneur program, but sometimes we feel quite uncomfortable in the public sector talking about money and charging for things, but you can still have a real social minded business and socially minded for-profit company. So the company I work for, AirLogic, that's something that we pride ourselves on, right? We want to do enormous societal benefit with our work, and so that's a noble aspiration. But also, you shouldn't undersell your value of your product or your service. So pricing is an interesting one, and invariably people get it wrong, right? You almost always get it wrong to start with. But there's a couple of ways that you can look at doing something called price anchoring. Which is go back to your existing alternatives. How much are people currently paying for those existing alternatives? And that can be a combination of time and effort. If you've got a nurse or a healthcare professional who's having to spend 10 hours a week doing rubbish admin, I don't know what your solution is, but there's a manual paper-based workaround, and it's a nightmare. You can save 10 hours a week. Well, you could attach a price to that, right? You know how much roughly that's going to cost, so you can start estimating from that. The other thing to do is to then look at your promise of a better way. Because sometimes people say, oh, well, there's the existing alternative, I've therefore got to come in beneath that. Well, that's only true if you're delivering the same outcomes. If you can solve that problem in a bigger and better way, then there's an interesting price point. And there's something interesting, you guys might know it, if you heard of prestige pricing, does that mean anything to you? That's when, if you go into any supermarket. Well, I don't know why I feel like from the BBC. I was going to say Sainsbury's. Other supermarkets are available. But if you go into Sainsbury's or Waitrose, which maybe in itself is an example of prestige pricing, you look at their bottles of mineral water on the shelf. They'll have their own brand, their essentials one, and then there'll be a artisanal Voss glass bottle or something, and that one's £3 and this one's 50p. But there's still loads of people who go buy the £3 one, right? And why is that? Well, it's because it's more expensive. We as humans, well, tiny little monkey brains, think that was more expensive, therefore it's got to be better, right? But so that concept is interesting. And so prestige pricing is a thing. So if you go in bargain basement and then try and sell that to your customers, then they may think that your solution's not as good as what they're currently using. So often the right place is you set a floor with the existing alternatives, and then you look at the size of the benefit that you're going to deliver. Right? So say I've got a new app, and it's going to be much better than the existing ways that people are managing patients in the community. And because of that, I think I'm going to reduce hospital admissions by 50%. And I know that there's 1,000 hospital admissions a year, so I'm going to say 500 hospital admissions a year, and I can attach a monetary value to those hospital admissions. Let's call it 10 grand, right? So I know that if someone uses my solution, they're going to be saving whatever it is. I've lost track of my mass, 500 grand a year. And then you want to then say, well, what's a realistic return on investment that people want to see? So 3 times return on investment would be great if you can get to that. 5 times or 10 times even better. But if you think that you can deliver your solution effectively and you can still make a profit and you can charge 50 grand a year per site, well, then you can go and say confidently, well, we're going to deliver a 10x return on investment, right? We're going to give us 50k and we're going to save you 500k. But so you can then set 2 parameters, right? Which is the size of the benefit which you're delivering, and the floor, which is how much they're paying for existing alternatives. The other thing, final part to your question, I think, was more around funding models themselves. And I mean, that's a whole discussion in itself. But subscription revenue is like gold dust if you can get it. So I think I would always recommend people look at a subscription-based model where they can. To go back to, was it David's point on losing subscribers, the hard work is getting customers in the door and turning them from a lead into a paying customer, and that's very difficult, and that's an expensive, costly, time-consuming endeavor. Once you've got people in the door, if you can get recurring revenue from them, that's absolute gold dust. And again, depends a lot on your solution. So but I would look at some form of subscription, but then you can layer in levels of complexity over that. So maybe there's a initial setup fee, and so that gives you a bit of cash in the door as a business and startup. That's often really important. But then there's an ongoing lower rate annual subscription. Maybe they get a basic level of service, but if there's additional usage or whatever, then there's some uplifts which you can charge periodically. The other thing, which sounds like it might play quite nicely for you, is like risk-based pricing. Is another really interesting model to explore. So you let's go back to our example where we're stopping people coming in from hospital. You say, well, here's our baseline package, right? And that's enough to keep the lights on. And so here's a little bit of a setup fee, and here's an annual subscription. But what we think we're going to do is we think that we're going to help you to save 500k a year. So if we are successful in achieving that goal with you, we hit our KPIs, then we get a further payment of 50k. But that way you've offset the risk for the customer. So they don't have to pay all of that money up front out of the gate. They can defer that risk, and only if your solution actually works and is successful do they then get the return on investment. So that's another interesting approach. I think the final one is to think about, doesn't always work, but I have seen examples of this working. Obviously NHS budgets are really tight, and rightly people are very cautious in what they spend money on, particularly with early stage companies who don't have a knock it out of the park health economic case and 5 randomized controlled trials or whatever. So how can you offset risk for the NHS if that's a potential customer? Then maybe you can find an industry partner or a sponsor who might help with that. Again, as I was saying before, what their problems if they're going to be your customer, because I almost guarantee they're going to be different from the NHS's problems, and they're going to be different from your users' problems. But what are the problems of, if I'm a pharma company, what is my problem, which I might pay you to solve? Well, I need to build brand reputation with clinicians. I need to get higher uptake of my new fancy medication, and the thing which is stopping me from getting that uptake is the fact that the NHS is so swamped. They're not doing the patient identification, which they should be, so they're not meeting their treatment guidelines. Well, is there something that you can do in your solution which helps to identify those patients, and therefore pharma would be interested in paying for it? So there's an almost entirely different business model that you could look at just by flipping that customer segment, and everything else can then kind of flow outwards from that on your lean canvas. So I feel like I've just done like a stream of consciousness.
Yeah, I feel like I would like to keep talking for ages, but no, thank you so much. That was enormously helpful, really.
Awesome. Brilliant. Any other questions? Any questions in the chat? I haven't looked in the chat.
There was a question earlier, which has partially been answered by the discussion just now. So thank you, Fabiola, for your question. But Irina has just asked, if it's an innovation within the NHS that's intended to be free for users, in this case GP practices, how do you tackle the revenue streams and cost structure sections of the lean canvas? So sort of a question of whether the lean canvas would need to be adapted for internal NHS projects. Not sure if you have any comments on that.
Yeah. So I mean, I think you would still, depends what you're doing, of course. There's still likely to be some costs attached to it. So even if that's your time, right? If you're wanting to do this on a full-time basis, who's going to pay your salary? Right? So, you know, I think very few of us are in a position where we could just give absolutely everything away for free. Now, that may be that you don't really want to make a profit, right? That's okay. But I think you would still, you know, even charities fundraise, right? Well, why do they fundraise? It's because they've got costs, right? Things cost money. And so I think you'll still need to address definitely the cost structure. The revenue stream is often different if you're like a not-for-profit or an entrepreneurship type thing. But again, you've got to find some way to fund those costs. So then you're probably going to want to think about possibly alternative sources of funding. So that it could be charitable funding, grant funding. It could be, if it's a full-on entrepreneurship type thing, could be getting written into a budget somewhere, right? And standing it up as a clinical service, as you might stand up any other line item which goes into you know, the OpEx of a GP practice. So it's still really relevant, but it's probably takes on a different shape as compared to like the subscription-based models and other things that we've been talking about. Yeah, Irina, I don't know if that helps, or if you want to expand on the question at all.
Yeah, it does a lot of it, because I did think about like time involved and the savings you could make, and the saving in clinician time and hours that they have to put in, and the impact on patients. But yeah, there's still the idea of who pays for them? Like if we do it, because I currently work in Nottingham for the ICB. I'm a pharmacist, and my idea is very much around, there's a lot of good projects that people share willingly within the NHS. Like they do a really good project, they collect the evidence, they share it at all these events, and then people liaise with each other, but there is no joint approach to, okay, guys, let's do this big scale if it works in that area. And my idea was sort of like, can we standardize that? Like if we have a good project from someone, can we create the tools and the templates and give them available and just promote them to practices, and whoever wants to take them on can take them on, and you can, you know, increase the quality of the work, ensure everyone has it together. You've got the same letters for the patients, the same type of consent, the same forms of data collections if you want, and that could help solving a different bit of thing that's missing. But yeah, I think I was a bit like, is there a different process for within the NHS innovation, and is there other bits that maybe we need to consider that aren't captured in the lean canvas? Yeah, cool, thank you, it helps.
Really interesting question. I guess looking at the wider innovation ecosystem might be interesting, like the health innovation networks. They may be good places to go and look and try and get some support. I guess it's kind of, in my mind, I probably would say this working for a consultancy, but it almost feels like a consultancy type play that you're describing, that you're going looking at a current practice. You've got a new method solving a problem, and you want to go in and help coach and train and implement this new practice. No, that could be something which you do. No, I could well imagine there'd be hospital trusts and others out there who'd be interested in having some kind of joint venture which is set up, and to have a kind of slightly arms length body. I see all of these like kind of health innovation labs and other things being set up in hospitals. So you've got an NHS owned entity, but it's a little bit separate, but then that can have consulting services which goes out to other organizations, and there's still some money which is changing hands, but it's done essentially at cost, right? So I think there could be a vehicle for that. And the other thing which I'd say is it sounds quite broad what you've described. I think maybe focusing in on some specific examples might help. And then that might also, for example, open up charitable funding. So say you're going to do something which is going to greatly improve Alzheimer's or dementia care. Well, going and speaking to Alzheimer's charities, they've now got a vested interest to scale best practice. So by refining your scope and lasering in on a single problem that you can want to solve with this, that might then open doors to funding. The other thing, it becomes easier to develop a health economic case if you've got that specificity as well, because you can, if you're tackling a big expensive problem for the NHS, well, then somebody somewhere will have a reason to pay to have that problem solved, right? So I think maybe it sounds like zoning in and picking one or two specific examples, and then from those examples, again, those iterations of the lean canvas that we've talked about, right? Like, what are those very specific problems that you would solve, and then who are the people who might be interested in paying for that problem to be solved? Yeah, that can be done within the NHS, or it could be, you could potentially set up something alongside or a joint venture or something else. But does that give you some ideas?
Yeah. That's, thank you. Thanks a lot.
Awesome. Any other questions, any other comments, any questions about the program as well? I should ask as well. I'd be happy to chat about any questions about applications or whatever it might be.
Yeah, feel free if anybody wants to put anything in the chat, or even just a comment about how you found the session and doing that lean canvas exercise, then please feel free. Or if anybody wants to share what their innovation is, it sounds like there's quite a number of you who have already got an idea and you're working on something already. So please do feel free. And thank you also for making introductions to yourself in the chat. I think that's really helpful. And I think a few people have made connections from the series so far. I don't know if... Oh, there's just a question in the chat, which I think Lucy will probably respond to, about eligibility for the programme. Tamsin, I don't know if you wanted to add anything in general about Lean Canvas or anything.
No, I find the Lean Canvas very helpful to do on a regular basis, so it is great. But I do take your point, Irela, actually, that it is what it is, and that there are wider questions to ask yourself as well. This is the kind of short, quick, dirty version, isn't it? But there are things like open access code, and some of the Royal Colleges now have keep a GitHub account, which in order to have things more open, so there is that opportunity to, if you want to just do it for putting it out there, that there is opportunities to do that. And the clinical entrepreneur program will take everybody from, but as Harry was saying, for most people, most of the time, you need something to keep it sustainable, even if it's a charity. Otherwise, it's really easy for things to fall over. But part of the reason that NHS workers are given this opportunity is that the numbers show that if you're working in your job for as long as possible and keeping your innovation going, both things are most likely to be successful. So you're more likely to be in your job for longer and be an expert in that place, and then you're also likely to keep your business going for longer, and it's likely to be more successful in the long run. So that kind of having a job while growing it, incredibly hard, but is a good way to keep things like that, and I guess makes things open for social value projects as well. Sorry, Josiah, was it?
Just a quick practical question. It sounds like this process.
Yourself, Josiah.
Oh, sorry. I'm Josiah. I'm a medical student who's currently integrating in a degree that's all about problem solving, cross disciplines. So sort of thinking about an idea that will be looking at research papers outside of medicine and trying to match them up with researchers within medicine to help collaborate across that. But it sounds like lots of people will start this program with an idea to get into the program, and then they'll realize throughout the program that they might have to go back to the drawing board. Is that really common? And sort of what is the sort of guidance and rules about sort of coming with a pitch and an idea, getting in, and then actually deciding a month in that it's going nowhere and starting again from scratch?
Sure. So I'm happy to take a first stab with Tamsin. I'm sure you've got thoughts on this as well. So I think that's totally fine, right? We do ask people to have an idea and to demonstrate that they can think about that idea entrepreneurially, right? So to have ideally done a little bit of research about it, to have understood the problem, and to be able to put a pitch together about, you know, the big vision for solving that problem. But good entrepreneurship is all about being agile and iterating. So I think we have, is it 40 to 50% of our intake is probably at idea stage or very early stage. So it's really common for people to come in, and then once you're part of the group and part of the network, you start speaking to all sorts of different people and hearing all of these talks from you know, better speakers than me and inspirational people. And then shifting, that's okay, right? That's totally fine. But in order to get through the door, I think demonstrating that entrepreneurial ability and mindset and energy, I guess, is pretty important. But yeah, Tamsin, I don't know if you'd like to add anything to that.
No, Harry, that's exactly what I would have said.
Probably better, Tamsin, but yes. I think maybe a time, but there's one more question that's spotted from Afsal. Afsal, do you want to come off microphone and just ask a question? Are you able to do that? If not, I'll read it out. No. So Afsal's asking, when you have an idea to address a problem, how do we do a market study and ensure that we have an adequate market, I guess? So again, I think it's going back to your lean canvas, looking at your customer segment and then getting out there and doing a little bit of research. And now we're blessed to be in the age of AI, right? And AI is good at one thing, it's very good at market research. You sometimes have to take its results with a little pinch of salt, I think, but it is really good at analyzing market trends and market size and that sort of thing. And I think if you read the Running Lean book, and it's a talk which I gave on the program recently, there's some really good stuff in there about stress testing your business model. And so it's about estimating how much you think firstly working out how much revenue you need in order to deem your idea successful. So what's your minimum success criteria? Then estimating how much you think you can charge for those price anchoring things that we talked about, and then looking at the market size to understand whether there's enough people out there who have that problem. So depending on your customer segment, once you've narrowed that down, doing a market size analysis becomes quite easy, right? So if you decide you're going to sell stuff to GP practices, where you can go on Google and in about 2 seconds work out how many GP practices there are, and then if you've got a rough idea in your head of how many people you need, so remember those 1% conversion rates, you can then say, well, are there enough GP practices who are going to pay me enough money that I can make my idea successful? So I think the shorter answer is get those fundamentals right on your lean canvas, make some estimates, and then once you've got those, you go and test your assumptions. And the way that you do that is by doing some desk-based research. And then then you can get into the fun game of actually trying to make the solutions and sell the thing. But one thing I definitely encourage all of you to do is to get your lean canvas to a point that you can make it work on paper. Because if you can't make it work on paper, the likelihood of being able to make it work in the real world is slim to none, right? And so understand your problem, understand how big that problem is, understand your existing alternatives and what's being paid for, what people currently pay for them. Then look at your customer segments, and from those boxes, on an estimated price point, you can then do an informed market study. That's the approach that I'd take.
And actually, you don't have to have done. You could have done all of that Harry has mapped out there. You might not have got to the point where you've been actually been able to run a particular study. But if you've got all of those things mapped out that Harry's saying, that makes a good application form for an early stage idea. So you might not have got as far as doing a study, but you might have thought through that and what you would do, and you would have those numbers that Harry was talking about. So and well, Lucy, you're the program manager. You like to see a kind of a robust application with having thought through those ideas, but you might not have got to the point where you're running something.
Yeah, I think it goes back to really understanding that problem that you are trying to solve and falling in love with that and knowing that detail. So, desktop searches, etc. But there are papers out there on certain problems, so you can obviously quote those in applications. I did link, if you wanted to go a bit further, I have linked to a few useful documents around patient and public engagement as well, if you go that far. But yeah, we really want you to understand that problem, and that it's not just something that maybe you see in an isolated area sometimes. And I think that's a really important thing. We see a lot of people who haven't really properly investigated that. So yeah.
Thank you. There's two more questions, if you don't mind, Harry, but
absolutely.
If anybody needs to leave, that's fine. And obviously, if we do run out of time, we do have another session coming up on the 23rd of October, so you can always save it for then. But Dawid has asked, I'm trying to move as fast as possible, but I often get lost in perfectionist details. Any advice on how to increase the speed of those build, measure, learn sprints?
Yeah. So I think getting better at your research question, if you're running an experiment, is what's really important, right? So you told me previously that you're struggling with drop-off rates from your subscription. So I would be coming up with hypotheses about why people are dropping off, and or how I could stop them from dropping off, and then being laser focused on that key metric, right? So I think refining your question and then running repeated experiments. I mean, you're a developer, so you'll know about rapid releases and CI/CD pipelines and all of that good stuff. And so if you read Lean Startup, he talks about they get to the point where they're literally running like 100 experiments a day, but they're all focused on trying to prove or disprove these hypotheses which they're coming up with, right? They're all like A and B split testing type experiments. So if we change this button over here, what does that do to this bit of user behavior? So I think trying to initially zoom out and think, well, what's the most important thing to make my business model work? In your case, I'd say it sounds like that drop off is a good place to start your experimentations. Then coming up with some hypotheses about things that you could potentially change, do some kind of rough gut feel prioritization of those, and then work through those experiments systematically, trying to identify the things which are going to turn the dial on your most important numbers. If that helps, that's really how I would tackle it.
Thank you, Harry.
Dawid, if you're talking.
Oh.
Sorry, I didn't hear you say something. I don't know. I don't think your mic's working, buddy.
Oh, sorry about that.
Yes.
It was an unexpected and very useful answer, so thank you.
Very good one. Like to be unexpected.
Thank you. And just one final question from Othman. He says, is it safe to assume if no alternative is available that the product is not worth developing?
Yeah, maybe. I think there's a nice line. I can't remember. It's one of the books, Evil Lean Startup or Running Lean. No, at this point in human history, pretty much every problem worth solving has been solved.
Can I elaborate, if I may?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, please.
Yeah. I mean, the only reason why
introduce yourself though first.
Yeah, sorry. My name is Othman Benjima. I'm a project manager within NHS England Midlands. In particular, leading on job planning for medical consultants. And the reason for my question is because I was involved in job planning many years ago when I used to work within a provider settings. And now that I'm leading on it from a sort of regional NHSE perspective, and I'm involved with the national team as well in terms of developing the whole process. And so I could foresee a lot of potential in an IT solution that will encompass a lot of systems that will bring a lot of efficiency to the whole process of job planning, and potentially because that's the pitch that we go to providers in terms of the efficiency that the whole job planning process can bring, and matching capacity and deliver versus what's being delivered. So there's a lot of variance that could be brought together into an IT solution that I could see in terms, because we're in the process of developing a dashboard that hopefully will bring all of that together. I'm sorry, I don't want to go on for too long, but in terms of the essence of my question is, if nothing has been thought of and developed, does that mean that it's not worth thinking through?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And I think having precise language here is important, because that problem is being solved, but it's not being solved by a technical solution. It's being solved by people like you logging into lots of different systems and doing a manual
Correct,
work,
yeah.
right? So what is the problem with that existing alternative? So there is an existing alternative, but it's just manual, right? It involves going all over the place. And the problem is admin intensive, it's time intensive, and you're probably missing out on a huge wealth of opportunities to do interesting analytics and AI on it as well, I would imagine, because it's all disparate, segregated data, which is only coming together in somebody's head or on a bit of paper. So I think there is a solution. But it's just not a technical one. So then I think if you're genuinely feeling that pain, and you can also see that there are other people out there who are going to be in the same job or a similar role who are also going to be feeling that pain, then it sounds like a good thing to try and ideate and solve. The thing that maybe you want to ask yourself in terms of your risks when you're assessing that is why no one has done it before, which is probably more of a technical problem, right? What are the barriers which have stopped somebody from developing, releasing this solution? Is it existing vendors being difficult with their APIs and not liberating that data for you to tap into? So I think there's maybe some assumptions that you want to test, but technical problems often, I think, particularly if we're working with clinicians, they often worry about the tech, and tech is often the easy bit. If you can figure out all the other bits of the model, and you can figure out a real problem that's going to save a lot of money, and there's lots of people who care about it, if you've got those bits right, tech is almost always deliverable. But yeah,
I'm sorry to just come in quickly, and it's the interoperability that's the main barrier to all of the other solutions that are out there in the market, and they only resolve one piece of the puzzle, not the whole puzzle. So and I think that's the main thing that's stopping private providers that are out there in the market at the moment, even though they've been commissioned by NHS providers for the solution, but that's only one part of the puzzle in terms of interacting with other systems within the NHS. That's the bit that they haven't solved.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, my day job with AirLogic is, I mean, our bread and butter is integration and interoperability. We built the NHS Spine, which is like one of the most complicated integration engines on the planet. So we know all about those problems. Yeah. And usually it's getting the vendors to liberate that data. And in order to do that, you either need powerful customers who will stamp their feet and demand it, or you need to have a carrot which you can dangle, which is something which the vendors get back in return. So then thinking about the problems of your vendors who are kind of going to be users of your solution, if you squint a little bit, and thinking about it from their perspective, why would they engage with you? How are you going to benefit them? That's one interesting question. Or can you get a powerful ally on the contract holder side who might be able to do it? The other thing which may be interesting is to validate your solution. It's probably scope for a whole nother talk, but thinking about either a concierge for MVP or a Wizard of Oz MVP, if you've heard of those terms. But that's when you put a human in the place of where the technology is and see whether that's a solution which you can package up and sell. And so you can almost demo what your amazing integration engine would be doing and producing a very nice report. Or you could do what they call a Wizard of Oz MVP. So to the customer or the end user, it looks like the text doing the clever stuff, but actually it's a human in the background is frantically typing. But there's maybe some interesting ways to test whether there's a market for your idea and test whether you can get appetite from customers to buy your solution. And if you can show that traction, that often could be the pathway to then releasing capital. Because if you go to an investor and you say, look, we've done this by hand, and we've already got these 10 customers, we've got these other 50 people who've said that they want it, but we can't service them. What we need is 250k of seed funding. If you give us that seed funding, here's how we're going to spend it. We're going to build this integration tool, and then we're going to go and access all of these customers. So you're going to see your return on investment within the first year, right? If you can create a narrative like that, it becomes really powerful. So it sounds like you could well be on something. I think the market size stuff that we were talking about would be interesting as well to dive into, you know, how bigger of a problem is it? How much, you know, time, sweat equity is the NHS or other big organizations spending on solving this problem? And then do you think you can solve it cheaper and better if you built your tech solution which worked? I don't know if that's helpful.
Really helpful. Thank you. No, you gave me some really good prompts that, you know, to think about. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank
Brilliant.
you. Thank you, everybody, for your questions. And thank you so much, Harry, for delivering the session this evening. Thank you, Tamsin. Thank you, Lucy, as well, of course. So our next session, everybody, is not next week, but the week after. So it's on Thursday, the 23rd of October. It will be at 6 p.m. again, and it will focus on the topic of pitching. So we'll have a communications coach called John Torrens who'll be sort of leading that session. So huge thank you again. Thank you, Harry. And yeah, if you have any questions in the meantime, I've just put our email address in the chat. Please do get in touch if there's any queries, there's anything we can help with. All right, lovely. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.